Hello and welcome. I'm Chris Moyer, and today on Z Prime Now, we will conclude our three-part series, Response, Recovery, and Resiliency, on how utilities and cities have handled the coronavirus pandemic for the first few months. Today, we will touch on all three of those topics, but focus much of our conversation on resiliency, innovation, and building a stronger future. To discuss innovation and resiliency, I'm joined by two experts in the field, Bernard DeSantos and Jan Vrins. Bernard, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And Jan, welcome to you as well.
Good to be here, Chris.
Bernard DeSantos serves as the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Operations and Infrastructure Support at the AES Corporation. In his role, Mr. DeSantos leads the company's global operations portfolio with businesses in 14 countries. Mr. DeSantos brings more than 30 years of experience in international corporate finance for generation, transmission, and distribution companies in the United States, Latin America, Europe, and Asia to his position. So Bernard, we're really excited to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm happy to join.
Yes. And Jan Vrins is the Global Energy, Sustainability, and Infrastructure segment leader for Guidehouse. Guidehouse is a management consultancy company that focuses on helping utilities and cities navigate changing business models and the move towards a clean and sustainable energy future. Jan, thank you again for being back on Z Prime Now.
Thanks, Chris, and good to see that you're changing your outlook as well as we go through this series.
Yes, that is true, Jan. I think the last time we spoke, I did not have the mustache, but COVID-19 has engendered some opportunity for me to have a little bit of fun with my facial hair. So it's good to experiment. Thank you. I look like I could be down in Miami with you in the 1980s or something like that.
That's right.
All right. Well, enough talk of facial hair. Let's dive in and discuss the response and recovery element of how utilities have reacted to the COVID-19 pandemic. Bernard, AES has operations around the globe. What unique steps have you taken as an organization to respond to the COVID-19 crisis effectively? And then specifically focus on what steps AES has taken to keep employees safe.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. Let me start saying that AES is a mission-driven company, that it is improving life by accelerating a safer and greener energy future. With our values of safety first, which is in the core of everything that we do, highest standard, we embrace our commitment, our integrity, and striving for excellence with our communities, stakeholders, and more important, for our customers and people. And lastly, and all together, which drive our partnership and collaboration approach to co-innovate, co-create, and resolve jointly with our customers and stakeholders. Let me mention that first, I'm really proud of our people and how quickly and effectively they actually have adapted to these new realities. During this pandemic, AES, like the whole energy sector, I will say, has been deemed an essential business, and we recognize how critical it is to maintain reliable and continuous operation during these difficult times. I attribute our effectiveness and accomplishment to the execution of our main approach to the short term, but also to adjust these unique circumstances to our second approach, that is really to deliver our strategy and our long-term objectives. So we're not jeopardizing our short-term or immediate crisis to our long-term growth. So in the short term, I think our focus has been, first and most important, protecting the health and safety of our people, our contractors, our communities, and our loved ones. For those who are able to actually work from home, we have shifted the teleworking and are using digital tools to connect with the teams around the world and accelerate the adoption of our smart operation, of our utility of the future strategy, to ensure that all of our essential personnel have access to and wear the personal protective equipment while implementing social distancing protocols and prioritizing actually access to our facilities. We have segregated our operational teams in blue, red, and green teams to assure skill capabilities at 3 levels of resiliency. So we have modified our maintenance schedule to our remote operation and analytics centers that we actually call internally smart digital hubs. We have doing pre-screening, testing, contact tracing, and monitoring has been done across all of our business without no exceptions. We're also supporting our people to navigate this complex time by reinforcing our wellness programs and support available to our employees, their families, and their communities. We encourage flexibility to balance their work life. This time has been difficult with the number of hours that we all need to dedicate to this. We are providing our global employee assistance programs to provide counseling service and training solutions to our people worldwide. Not everybody is in the same place in these difficult times. We are creating an emergency relief fund to provide economic assistance to our employees who has been directly impacted or their families have been directly impacted by COVID-19. Warranting our continuous operation to deliver energy upon which customers depend has been our second objective in the short term. Having secured adequate inventories in case of supply chain disruption has been one, enhancing our liquidity since the beginning of the pandemic, delivering our construction projects to fulfill our customers' expectation and commitment. And to be true, we have had some delays. Community engagement has been our third focus in this short term. During COVID-19, the most important thing we can do for our communities is to continue to deliver in the energy. But we also providing basic needs to support our first responders, hospitals, in every market that we operate. I personally, again, so proud of our people, have been working heroically despite the adversity, and they are carrying the AES mission and values over their shoulders. So it has been an amazing experience.
Well, I absolutely, so many of the things that you just mentioned really resonate with me, and I'm sure our audience as well. And the word I want to key in on is that heroic one, because yes, it is unquestionable that doctors and nurses, grocery store workers, logistics professionals that are keeping so much of our society together deserve all of the applause and the gratitude that they get. And probably they deserve more. But yeah. I will say that utility professionals are too often left out of that equation. And without the utility, and I know you're going to be very humble about it, your remarks already have spoken about the pride in the staff at AES. But too often utility professionals are left out of that equation, and you are approaching this in a very heroic manner in these extraordinary times. So first of all, thank you right off the bat. And thank you to everybody at AES and utilities around the United States and around the globe. Jan, I want to bring you into this conversation because a month into the pandemic, you and I spoke with Badr Khan, the president of National Grid US, on how utilities were responding in those first few weeks to the pandemic, from both a public health concern and then also a business continuity perspective. As the pandemic continues to evolve, how are utilities responding from that operational and worker safety perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And it is indeed very interesting to see how utilities are evolving their response. And you know, Bernard was very complete and comprehensive in what AES does. And we see that with many of the other utilities as well. You know, obviously the field and critical operations personnel, you know, continues to report to work. You know, they have to maintain essential service. But we also, you know, see that utilities right now are, you know, kind of struggling with the question when to bring non-essential personnel back to the workplace. Because for a lot of the non-essential personnel who have been working from home, it's actually working pretty well. So as you know, we as an organization, Guidehouse, is thinking about when we bring our consultants back to our offices or our client sites. You know, I think utilities are struggling with, you know, what the timing of that would look like. And I must say that most of the utilities right now are not thinking of bringing their non-essential workers back before the end of the year at the earliest. So that's interesting. they're now also adapting, which is really important, Chris, to the storm season and the impact of a very warm summer with temperatures that are really high, like above 2 degrees higher than average. 7 states actually reported their warmest July on record. In terms of storms, we've had 10 year to date, large ones with over $1 billion of damage, and we're on track for probably one of the highest years in terms of impacts of these natural disasters and storms. And you and I have been talking about that. So what this has done is that it really puts more pressure on operations, from a load share perspective, from a maintenance perspective. It also has postponed a lot of the regular maintenance and upgrades, which is creating an even larger backlog than normal, with, to be honest, increased challenges around reliability and safety as well. So those are some, I think, things that utilities, as we go, are starting to look at as well. Because again, besides COVID, they have to deal with other things like storms or high temperatures as well, on top of everything else.
It always is those compounding crises that exacerbate challenges in operations. And so I know that this is something that is keeping folks like Bernard and many other utility executives up around the country right now. Before we move on to our next question, I want to thank everybody in the audience for tuning in today. Z Prime Now is very grateful for our audience, and we're very grateful to AES and Guidehouse for participating in this conversation. As we discuss recovery, response, and resiliency, we want you, the audience, to ask as many questions as you would like, and you can do that in the chat box of your of your WebEx system. And please feel free to ask questions of the audience, and we will do our best to answer as many of those during this hour-long discussion as we can. As we shift back to the conversation, I want to ask both of you how utilities are working with customers as communities work to recover from the economic challenges of COVID-19. And clearly, there's been a lot of pain economically felt around the world, not just the public health side of this disaster. But Bernard, starting with you, what steps is AES taking to support both business and residential customers during this time?
Yes, and thank you, Chris. And I will try to actually do some examples as well. I think, let me start to say, and forgive me, but I'm really proud to be part of this company. It's a company that cares. And I think caring is essential in these times. And one of the things that we have done is actually working with governments and regulators, and that we have actually discussed in the EEI, and other has been no disconnection policies. And we have carried out that from the US also for the rest of our operations in Latin America and the rest of the world. And that has been really focused on our residential, but also focus of the commercial customers, and establish, flexible payment plans and policies for electricity bills that has been unpaid as a result of the COVID-19. In El Salvador, more than 210,000 clients have opted for these auctions. And this is actually benefit approximately 1 million people, if you assume probably 4 or 5 individuals per family for every group of the family. The financial cost of the payment plans granted to our clients has been actually carried off by our business, AES El Salvador, but also for our other energy creditors in the system. The distribution companies have worked with multilateral banks to continue to cash flow, to honor our payment commitments, and to prevent the interruption of payment in the chain of the electric sector in El Salvador. I think another example have been the proactive step to reach out to our customers in Indiana and Ohio through Indianapolis Power and Light and Dayton Power and Light. Today, our customer service agents are working tirelessly, making outbound phone calls to customers who have unpaid balance to enroll to eligible customers in payment plans as well. So our utilities have reached out to more than 100,000 customers so far. They have balance They have listened to them. They understand the circumstances and accommodate their needs. So it's a flexible plan. We have designed a dedicated resource page for residential and commercial customers on our website with links to resources to support such as utility assistance, food assistance, a small business loan, and we are actually communicating via digital and traditional media campaigns in order to share those resources so they can actually have the access to reach out. So it's not only to offer them, it's actually give the access to them to reach out. We have been working with recognized, reliable, and effective partners to maximize the benefits to ensure positive long-term impact for the communities. They have better logistics than us in order to do so. So those partners have been very helpful. As well, we have launched more than 65 initiatives globally to responding to the pandemic. This program were focused on energy and education, health, capacity building, innovation, and livelihood. You know, we are pivoting this to immediate response to high impact sustainable progress so they remain to help customers to facing financial hardships, creating job opportunities, stimulating the local economy, and designing safety protocol with communities throughout growth, construction, and development projects. So one of the things that we're doing right now, as we have continued our construction and development for our projects, is that we actually encourage and putting targets out there for our EPC contractors and ourselves in order to actually hire local communities in the places that we actually are doing our construction programs. And lastly, but not less important, but release funds has been set up to households needing utility assistance as a result of the COVID-19. And customers, given portals that have been open so customers can help the neighborhoods as well. So has been a very proactive approach. And also there has been deep discussions for the point that Jarns has been mentioned about storms. One of the things that US has that is amazing and is incredible is the supporting the restorations when those storms actually happen. That has been actually a big discussion during this pandemic and exposure to our people. I think the guidance, the protocols in combination of all the utilities in the US have made that happen. So recently in the Isaias storm, there were restorations teams coming from the mid of the US in order to support the East Coast. So that has been, it's really glad to see that we were able actually to create protocols to continue to do that support.
Bernard mentioned so many really proactive steps that AES is taking to help support their customers, particularly focused on the moratorium on shutoffs, which is so crucial during hot summer months. You mentioned July being one of the hottest on records. What other innovative steps are you seeing other utilities take to engage with customers and even help them save money during the crisis when they're spending more time at home?
Yeah, I think a couple ones that Bernard didn't mention because he mentioned a lot already, but we're seeing an increased focus and effort on clean energy programs, energy efficiency, demand response programs, and then specifically focused, Chris, on low and middle income customers and small businesses as well, by the way. So that is really encouraging. Several states are really, and utilities are really stepping up to the plate because of the load that has shifted more to residential right now. We all have a higher electricity bill, and there where utilities can help, again, specifically the lower income customers, reducing their energy usage and making use of smart technologies to manage their demand, I think is a win-win for everyone. I would like to see, actually, to be honest, both at the state level and even at the national level, that governments really embrace that, because I think for relatively, a modest investment in those programs, there will be significant return. You create actually jobs through these programs. You can actually invite minority-owned businesses to support these programs. So you create jobs, you drive economic development, we save electricity and energy, and everybody benefits from that. I think you froze there for a minute. I hope I didn't freeze. But the other one is engaging with local businesses, Chris. Specifically disadvantaged minority-owned businesses. I think utilities always had that leadership by example, which is really good to see. And they're stepping up to the plate also in terms of mentoring those businesses as well. All this is very important in the context of I think a renewed focus on ESG, so environmental, social governance, from their investors, from their boards, from the executive teams. We are seeing a significant interest in that. So they're expanding their ESG programs, and all the things that Bernard and we have been talking about really fit under that umbrella. And I personally think there is a bigger role for utilities going forward in the broader energy system, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But with that bigger role comes also bigger responsibility as it pertains to the communities that they serve, and specifically helping underserved communities and businesses.
Well, yeah, and I think you touched on quite a few things that I believe. I know we will come back to in this conversation and probably for months to come, and that is the economic recovery piece and how facilities can be central to that from a community economic drive perspective, engaging a multitude of different businesses and stakeholders, particularly minority-owned businesses, and then also what does it mean to build back in a responsible manner. Let's put a pin in that for just a moment and talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned. It's clear that utilities have responded to what truly is an unprecedented event in all of our collective lifetimes. Pandemics have always happened, but in modern society, there was no one could have planned at the beginning of 2020 that this was going to transpire the way that it did. Business continuity has been pretty successful. That's what we've discussed. But what are some of those lessons learned, Bernard? Despite the ongoing challenges from a public health and economic perspective, those operations must continue. And as Jan and you have both discussed, from storms and other outages, problems will persist. What are some of those key lessons learned, and what should the industry as a whole take away from the first half of 2020?
Yeah, that's
a lot.
That has been a question that is come up in different forums, and I think we're getting better as we go.
Yeah.
On this, but I think sometimes we realize how good are in the core of everything that we do when crisis actually hit us. So I will start to share first. I think the first learning that I would like to share is culture. This pandemic has shown that to all of us, the pride and commitment of all of our people that are in the front line. So the essential people, we talked about the utilities a few minutes ago, and they have worked, but they really love what they do and how much they actually care, about the customers and actually have a reliable a grid and delivery of energy in the case in our sector. So I think one of the first learnings is we will continue to grow and strengthen our culture and the behavior we have cultivated in the past. We have demonstrated that in the present has actually come up very strong. So we need to continue to evolve and embrace that in our future. So I think that is probably a very important. Changes doesn't happen without people. So so that is really important. The second one, and I always define the digitalization in two types. The first one is digitizing, and in the way we have initiated 4 years ago our digital journey, and we have seen how digital tools can transform really the way that we work. So our people are collaborating across the world, designing new remote and virtual reality process to work on site and off-site work. Smart maintenance has been a one that we actually named in that way in asset management, sharing best practice every day to continue to execute the operation in a safe and reliable manner. But I think more important in the digital side, I think, has been the adoption and the change management. So we have been in a need in order to actually change. So the change management is just happening, and the adoption has been exponential. So we have increased significantly. What we have seen is increasingly increasing the adoption in analytics in our operation and in our construction that has been to facilitate a safe operating environment to our people. So scaling that digital initiative that we have implemented over the last several years has proved critical in our work today. Our asset management team is using the data and information to receive from the facilities to analyze, plan, do scheduling, and actually conduct or tolerance of risk for when we can actually have contractors and technicals on site during this exposure of the pandemic. I think one important that we have realized is the resiliency of the business model, not only the business continuity. So we believe that we have withstanding the impacts of the pandemic as AES, despite the decline of the market demand that has been severe in many of the states and many of the countries. So AES generation business has been largely, honestly, unaffected due to the take or pay nature of the contract, but also the quality of the customers. And some of them has been also deemed essential as well. I think the other thing is where you focus on. There are so many things that are happening. So we need really to focus on the urgent and in the importance, more in the important than in the urgent, because the urgent came by the needs of the pandemic itself. So I also want to highlight how we have had to focus ourselves on what is really important, okay? And reprioritize our work streams to focus on the objectives that we need to achieve during this time. It's very easy to focus on the short term and then start to forget to the long term. So we are actually looking for what we do in the short term that actually not jeopardizing, but building up in order to continue to deliver and achieve our strategy in the long term. I think lastly, and not the less important, has been establishing the strong partnerships in the markets that we operate. And that comes from the beginning. It's not only a partnership from the strategic sourcing side or co-creation side, is partnership in the stakeholder management with the communities. So engaging and interacting with our stakeholders in a regular basis. Identify areas that we actually can collaborate and cooperate together. Fostering those relationships has been critical for us, has been critical for our success. That has allowed us to react more promptly for this pandemic that we didn't plan for, and in all of our markets. So that cooperation and be close to our stakeholder management, to the ministers, to the authorities, to our communities, to the leader of the communities has been important to identify, and we can actually direct our resources on those places. And we have learned that not necessarily what we have done in social responsibility before is actually resilience in this moment. So there are some adjustments that we have made and learn from that.
Jan, picking up on what Bernard was just saying, particularly about culture and change management, I know thematically you like to focus on the framework of building back better. That's so prevalent in Europe right now and has been adopted by Joe Biden's presidential campaign. Two-part question here. What does build back better mean for utilities? And then how does the idea of building back better play into the evolution of that new business model for utilities as a network orchestrator, something that Bernard was hinting at in his comments?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if Joe Biden picked up it from the energy industry, but it's a different discussion. But for our industry,
go around certainly.
Yeah, that's right. For our industry, build back better simply means that our industry, should and will invest in cleaner and more resilient energy infrastructure. This will create sustainable jobs. This will drive economic development, and will actually address, one of, if not our biggest challenge still out there, which is climate change. As you said, Europe has taken a lead, but we see, several states here in North America really embracing, this concept as well. So that's really interesting. What it means for utilities, it's very compelling. And I've told you this story several times that 5 years ago we created as at that time we were still Navigant, now Guidehouse. We created this concept of energy cloud, and we developed scenarios, 2030 scenarios of where the industry would be in 2030. Again, 5 years ago. And in the most aggressive scenario, we predicted that half of the capacity of a utility would come from renewable energy and distributed energy resources versus conventional central station generation like coal, gas, and nuclear. I remember 5 years ago when we presented this that very few people thought that this scenario would actually happen. Coal and nuclear were doing fine. Gas generation was up and coming, growing significantly. And to be honest, renewables 5 years ago needed, incentives, needed subsidies, and distributed energy resources was, not really impacting, the utility business model yet. So 5 years ago, fast forward to today, see what has happened. In a recent study that we did, State and Future of the power industry, together with Public Utility Fortnightly, over 60% of the executives responded that renewables and DER are the most disruptive force to the utility business model. So yes, we expect more, increase in investments in new energy infrastructure, renewables, storage, offshore wind, all that. On storage, by the way, and I'm sure Bernard will comment on that as well. We expect storage next year to pick up 3 times the amount of implementation that has happened, that will happen this year, over 220 megawatts of storage in the US next year. E-mobility, smart buildings. So utilities are really shifting away from this, asset-based, asset management, central station generation, transmission, distribution, construct, to one where they will add over time significant more value to their customers as well as to the shareholders by being an orchestrator of different new platforms. And what we mean by platforms is how we manage buildings and energy usage across a set of buildings, virtual power plant concepts, how we manage EV charging infrastructure and e-mobility platforms, obviously behind the meter generation and storage solutions as well. And the utility really has the role to orchestrate the larger grid, including those platforms. If the utility doesn't take that role, it will be very expensive for us. It will be a very high societal cost because we need to optimize. I mean, the utility optimize that network of networks. It will be very unstable, and it will not be very reliable, and it will not be a safe infrastructure neither. So that's the role of the utility that we see going forward, and that's the orchestration role that we talk a lot about, and that's new for utilities. And as they obviously maintain the current role of providing reliable, safe, affordable electricity to their customers, they're starting to move now into new business models where they become more of an orchestrator of adjacent platforms with a broader set of products and services that will be provided to their customers.
I think that is something that just as you described, in the last 5 years, we've come so far, and over the next decade, how much further we can go. It's very exciting. Before we dive a little bit deeper on that, and we have had some great questions from our audience, we're going to touch on those. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about how AES and utilities around the country and around the world are looking to support people more and more. And the public health and economic impact of COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted Black and Hispanic communities in the United States and lower income communities throughout the world. As companies work to build back better, how can we build communities that are more equitable and sustainable? And Bernard, I'd really like to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, that is it's a difficult question to start with. Let me give you a little bit of our thoughts, related to this. I think I think the first thing is to build a community that is more equitable and sustainable. I engage, and we need to integrate those communities into our planning process. So need to be part of our planning process. And otherwise it's left out. You are not planning, you are just providing them without a very thoughtful way to do it. And so they need to be in our planning, and as we actually advance and ensure that access. In our case, it's energy, but it's access to them. And that doesn't happen overnight, as we can see. So I think a public and private alliance, are key to advancing access to energy in our case, or to education, as we can actually support this. I think that is fundamental. And continue a successful development of the electric sector is essential. So everybody have electricity, must be in a way also responsive, but also need to be local, socialized. Could not we as a global company need to work? We can think globally, but we need to act locally, and because there are economics and social imperatives that you need to take care. And what are those social imperatives? So you were talking about that, but it's promote social stability. There is a low income, economy, mostly in Latin America, that is heavily impacted by the COVID. Need to be a focus on increased per capita income. So we need to provide support in the communities. At least every company should do that in their communities that they serve or that they are actually operate. Provide access to safe and reliable energy. I think energy at a lower cost and reliable is fundamental for that transformation. Increase affordability of that energy, include marginal populations in that planning process. Promote energy security through use of alternative fuels. And Jan, for sure, is going to talk a lot about that. He has more experience than me on that end. But a good corporate citizen, how it looks like, is actually sharing the responsibility with the government. It's not only a government responsibility. We need to support the community. We need to support the cause. And in order to do that, the way that a private sector, I think, can operate is by partnering, by investing, by volunteering with culturally and diverse non-profit organizations that actually have the logistics in the areas, that they are stronger. They are strong in economy development, like the Trust of the Americas, just to give an example. Workforce development, actually cultivating the education and capabilities. Environment, need to be friendly environment. Okay, that is something that is a must care. Everybody's moving in a clean energy environment, a cleaner environment, not only energy. And as well, diversity, diversity and inclusion, and in everything that we serve, and that actually generate plan and targets and goals that we need to achieve based on what is really the population of the communities that we operate or serve. So policy was mentioned before, policies to contractors and to our hiring that need to be hired locally. And so we need to promote that and actually put targets on those, and put targets on genders, and put targets in religions, and put targets. So we actually, have an encouragement in order to do that planning and execute on those. Finally, I believe that investing in education is the key. So education and capabilities in building for the communities that we serve is the most key and probably the most powerful that we can do in the future. And in education, looking at the life cycle of the education. I actually was discussing in the advisory board of Indianapolis Power and Light on 2 days ago. And this was actually a subject of the discussion. So how we do the education is not only to provide education, it's to provide education and follow that through, that you actually build the capabilities and you actually can make that happen in the company. We have two examples, and I don't want to sound those are the ones that we need but just to share. And I think those are key ones in things that we do. One is in El Salvador. Salvador, as everybody may understand, is Salvador and Central America are very machistas, environments. So in 2006, and a group of women in the company actually create a program that is called AES Mujer. that is AES Women. And they actually partnership with an organization in El Salvador that is called Ciudad Mujer, that is Woman City, and translated into English. And they create a project to create opportunities to include in the economic development by offering technical training and residential electrical installation. So over 300 women were actually certified in 3 levels of certification that is granted by the government. They can certify, we provide the training, and they are certified in order to be electricians. Electricians that can do work in residential, so low voltage, or then certification 2 is for business and commercial, so they can do a little more complex thing. But the certification number 3 is actually working as a lineman in our distribution companies. So you build the capability, but you also offer the opportunity of work independently or in the companies that are in the market. Another very nice example that is in Colombia as part of a program that is called Mujeres con Energía, that is a women with energy campaign. That is to promote, this is focused to gender equality as well in the organization. And AES Colombia hired 111 women in the construction of a solar farm that is called Parque Castilla, a solar project for Ecopetrol, to work in various technical aspects, operational, but also in the administrative and the safety side for the construction process. So education should be, I will say, on the heart for a stable and equitable and productive and prosperous society. And I think, it need to be through the companies, need to be through us as individuals. We need to be voluntary of those. And if we take that consciously, because diversification, yes, in US is about color based on the roots that they have. But when we look places in Latin America, it's about Indians or native, and it is about, gender, and it is about different economic reach, so incomes. So those are important. I think we need to invest today, and in order to actually see a better future tomorrow. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's not an easy topic, and it's very diverse.
Well, it isn't an easy topic, but Bernard, I really appreciate your perspective on it. And what's clear to me, and I want Jan to come in on the conversation too, but what has allowed some of these programs to take place, and clearly your programs have predated some of the conversations that we're having, and that's crucial. But it's prioritization and then planning. Without prioritizing diversity, equity, inclusion, the environment, these things aren't going to happen organically. And then it's planning to implement this over a period of time. As you said, it's not going to happen overnight. So Jan, what else can utilities do? Is it exactly what AES is doing? Are there some other steps? Talk to us about that from a macro perspective.
Yeah. So what's it's really interesting what Bernard is mentioning, and also the examples, and it is very, very, very encouraging to see how equality, and whether that's economic or social, diversity, gender, race, doesn't matter, how equality, climate, and energy become more intertwined. Utilities always had the responsibility to provide, electricity to everyone at an affordable price, safe, reliable, and basically take care also of low income families. And when sustainable solutions 5 years ago, like rooftop solar or EVs and things like that came about, there was a real risk that these solutions would only be for people that could afford them because they were expensive, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But now we see that the cost of those solutions, combined with the concept of sharing some of those resources, sharing, e-mobility solutions, sharing renewable energy, really will drive and accelerate the energy transition and benefit the broader population, especially the underserved communities. So, zero marginal energy, right? Can we provide energy to everybody at zero cost? It might be a dream, but we're getting closer to that, because again, some of those renewable solutions and energy resources are becoming really, really cheap and close to zero. If we then take excess renewable energy and we can create really cheap hydrogen and we can fuel our cars with that, then we save the average person a lot of money as well. If a car powered by hydrogen is as expensive in 5 years from now as a gasoline car, and the fuel is for free, look what that does in terms of helping out the low income people. So we see examples now in Colorado with the utility there, where they really look at e-mobility programs benefiting underserved communities from that perspective, and at the same time improving air quality and pollution, right? So we see really climate and equality and economic development really coming together under this energy transition umbrella, which is really, really exciting. And it goes without saying that a more equitable community is obviously going to be a lot more sustainable going forward.
Well said. As we shift into just about the last 15 minutes of this conversation, there's still so many things that we have to touch on. I want to bring into the conversation some great questions that we've had, and I'll just say right now to our audience, keep those coming in. Jim Jim M in the chat box specifically to me asked a question for Bernard about the electricity grid and digital transformation. And that sort of touches on a question I wanted to ask you anyway, Bernard, as we start thinking about resiliency and energy storage and grid modernization, projects that are near and dear to your heart, to Jan's heart. Right now, it is clear the world is awash in debt, but one of the lessons learned from the 2008 Great Recession was that Keynesian economic idea that stimulus is key to economic recovery. Is now the time for utilities and governments to be working together to modernize the grid and make significant progress towards digital transformation?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. I think what is happening right now is everything. The customers are in the driving seat. So each of us are in the driving seat, and I think the pandemic has actually made it deeper and wider. So because digital is honestly right now in our life. So we may like it, we may not, but it's in our life, it's there. So everything is about that experience and how you actually can do it. So the first thing I think you need to actually change. So you need to actually adapt to this, and you need to be more in the edge of those. So digital technologies, leverage for breakouts of breakthroughs of big data, analytics. Those are actually making patterns and trends very visible, and it has been honestly brutally exponential in the way it has been during this pandemic. So the way that we see ourselves in the utility is that we try to innovate in 3 areas, and one is in the core and the other one is in the new and future business models. So that has been very important for us. Let me try to talk a little bit about those. The 3 primary areas of the utilities in the digitalization in the core has been grid modernization that we were just mentioned. Okay, it's to increase the reliability, it's increase the renewable integration, is aspirational goals like self-healing of the grid, means no outage at all. So those drive actually in order that you are incorporating as more analytics and as more robotics and automation in order to make that happen. Smart operations is to add analytics to the operational intelligence and process automation, is advanced metering infrastructure, is grid operation with enhanced sophistication for forecast or orchestrate and accelerate volumes of intermittent grid connected resources. And that is everything coming from there in this clean energy environment. T&D asset management, transmission and distribution asset management, and virtual modeling and data twins. those actually have helped in order to model and actually test those things in the future. Customer experience, they like the customer. I don't think we cannot do it. They are right in the driving seat right now. So we need to create initiatives that actually following the energy efficiency that is Jarns was talking a few minutes ago, smart homes and proactive communication. Quick examples for what we're doing in our utility side in AES. Well, Fluence, that is the joint venture with Siemens. This is the global leader in utility scale energy storage solutions. We have another initiative that is Motor. That is an initiative that seeks to promote the use of energy efficiency and environmentally friendly with electric vehicles. We recently make a partnership with 5V, whose design enabled customers to add solar 3 times faster while providing up to 2 times more of the energy within the same footprint of the traditional solar farms. Uplight, that is the premier customer cloud built with utility providers for their customers. So Light is really focused on engaging customers in a dynamic and a digital work, and that is understanding the energy consumption, taking action based on data, not only in commercials and publicity, collaborate to actually optimize the energy use. And we also, in this journey has Google. We have accelerated the growth and adoption of a clean energy, actually working for them in order to provide really 24/7 on those. So all these things are really coming. I don't see COVID-19 is actually creating any delay or stoppage. So this is to come. I really believe that the adoption has been exponential and is coming to stay, and the adoption will be accelerated by itself.
And Chris, if I may,
Please.
what is really fascinating is that when Bernard and the industry talks about engaging with customers and with the communities, you can do that through programs, and you can do that by reaching out and customer engagement and things like that, understanding customer behavior, which is really important. But we're talking about a structural change here, because that customer engagement with communities, underneath that, there's the infrastructure. And as I mentioned, the energy cloud, but actually infrastructure will now go well beyond the meter, right? All the things that Bernard mentioned here are things that go behind the meter. So there's an infrastructure change here to this, network of networks beyond the meter, in people's homes, in our businesses, in our office buildings, in our manufacturing plants. It's driven by consumers becoming prosumers, climate, greener, sustainability, and that creates this social engagement level as well. So it's just fascinating to see how, again, the role of the utility is expanding. In terms of infrastructure, in terms of products and services, in terms of technologies, digitalization, and the social element and the community and client engagement in that thing. This is not rocket science. What's going on is really predictable.
With that idea of predictability and the other idea of making sure that we invest now to build the system we want in the near future. People often talk about black swan events when something unexpected happens. But I know, Jan, you like to frame pandemics and natural disasters as a gray rhino, because this is something that we don't see a lot, but when they do happen, what steps, and this is a two-part question here, what steps can utilities take to become more resilient against future threats like climate change? And then we had an audience question specifically around renewables. So I'd like you to address that within the context of what steps are you seeing utilities take, AES and others, around energy storage, renewables, beneficial electrification.
Yeah, it's all of the above, Chris. But yes, these are absolutely gray rhino events, and the difference between a gray rhino and a black swan event is that the gray rhino event is highly probable, high impact, but a neglected threat, and it's actually threats that we see coming, but we don't do anything about it. But both climate change, all these storms, as well as the pandemic that we're going through, are actually gray rhino events and not black swan events from my perspective. I mean, if you look at the data, average number of storms over the last 30 years, about 6.5. In the last 5 years, double that, right? So I mean, it's very predictable. Utilities are doing all of the above, what you mentioned. I think distributed energy resources, specifically storage, of course, are definitely can definitely help with resiliency. They will need to strengthen some of the hardcore poles and wires as well, and many utilities have been doing that, including AES as well. So we will need to continue doing that because the damage is going to be tremendous if we don't do that. But actually, just thinking through, the different scenarios and what as a utility you can do to be prepared and to address it. That's what we really see more utilities doing. So the whole, climate risk, linking it, integrating it into, utility business risk management, I think is really key. And yes, they can help with renewables, they can help with storage, they can help with making the infrastructure stronger. I actually think that EVs, and if we have enough EVs out there, Colorado is now talking about 1.5 million EVs between now and 2030. That's a lot of electricity that you can store and have available to make the grid more resilient. So yeah, I think utilities are thinking along those lines. The challenge is, the timing and when are these businesses profitable, and where does the funding come from? So those are things that they're working through.
We have just a few minutes left, and this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. Bernard, I want to, if you could just very briefly talk a little bit about some of the steps that AES is taking around storage with the limited time that we have left.
Yes, well, let's everybody. It's a fact that we're moving in clean energy, and that incorporates renewables. I think there is also a fact that renewables is intermittent. So it's just when the sun is there or where the wind is blowing. So and that is where I think we need to look. Everyone, I think most of the companies are saying yes. I think we're on track in order to build our renewable goals in order to have 22 gigawatts by 2024, but also to decarbonize ourselves for less than 30% coal by the end of this year and less than 10% by 2030. And many have goals about 2050. We mentioned 2030 because this is the thing that will stand accountable to achieve it. So we want to celebrate that. We're not going to pass to others But the issue with the renewables, as I mentioned, is intermittent. So the utilities face an increasing challenge in order to integrate that intermittent for generation source. And there is a critical need for the grid stabilization. So energy storage is honestly a great solution for that. So over the decade, we actually, when we talk about utility energy storage, we saw that opportunity with lithium battery and the reliability support energy storage. We started that in 2007 in Indianapolis Power and Light, and then in Chile, that was the first energy storage. That opportunity and that progress actually is what has created today that we have Fluence. And Fluence, as I mentioned, a joint venture with Siemens, is the global leader in energy storage. So Fluence offers customers a wider and variety of proven and cost-competitive energy storage system options. But let's talk about what is capable for that and what we believe that is it. First, Fluence has actually deployed more than 2 gigawatts since inception, so in the last 2 years, and has presence in 22 countries now, and have more than 40 digital applications that actually come from the energy storage. In June, Fluence actually launched a 6th generation product that is like a modular Lego type cube, that is designed for a safer and more reliable. So it's actually lower cost and more easy to actually, and already have 800 megawatts in orders already now, and that just happened in June. We really believe in the solar plus storage or renewable plus storage with wind. We actually were the first one in order to have a truly 24/7 renewables on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. We see that as a trend. We see that as and it's coming really hard. Also, there is different application, virtual reservoir or a virtual dam. We actually have in Ron River Hydros. We just installed 10 megawatts in one of our Ron River Hydros in order to work as a virtual reservoir in order to actually to deploy the. So we really believe that there are many applications for the transmission, for the distribution, for Black Star, for backup generation, that actually energy storage is actually come to stay. It's going to be big, and that is what we see. The costs actually have lower and have a very good integration with many other of the renewables. So we believe it's a great solution. There is also, a trend related to hydrogen, but I will let Jan talk about that one.
Well, very quickly, I think what it comes down to, Chris, is the following. We'll have so much renewables that we can't store everything. And whatever we can't use or store in all those great solutions that AES is building, we will be able to produce hydrogen pretty soon, probably within the next 5 years, at the same price point as, like natural gas. And we can use it for heavy industries, to decarbonize heavy industries. We can use it for heavy transportation. It has very specific areas where it can help the decarbonization. And I think it's really exciting to see what's happening in Europe. And I would invite everyone to take a look at how quickly hydrogen is taking off, both in terms of what it can do and also in terms of cost points. Because those curves that we've seen with solar and with storage, as Bernard said, we're going to see even steeper cost decline curves with hydrogen production, and we're going to need all of the above. That is what's so exciting of this energy transition.
Well, I certainly know that hydrogen is a key topic that you are paying very close attention to, Jan. I think we need to get back on and have a greater discussion on that and its potential to potentially transform the gas side of the utility business and make that clean and green for the long term. But we have come to the end of the hour. This conversation has been fascinating. I appreciate everybody in the audience for your fantastic engagement, your questions, your comments. We couldn't get to all of them, but it certainly shaped all of Jan and Bernard and my part of the discussion. So thank you all for those questions. I also want to thank Chris Holt, the producer from Z Prime that made this episode possible. Thank you, Chris, and all of the staff at AES and Guidehouse who helped to make this conversation possible. Finally, as we wrap up, Bernard, thank you so much for your conversations and the work that you and everybody in the utility industry is doing to keep the power flowing and keep people safe.
Thank you very much, and it has been a pleasure, and more than happy to get in contact again and trying to go through some of the Q&As that were left.
We have quite a few, so I'm going to hold you to that. We're going to have you back on, Bernard, and we're going to go through some of the Q&A and have many more future discussions. Jan, thank you so much for your thought leadership and expertise in this issue.
Always good to be with you, Chris.
All right. I'm Chris Moyer for Z Prime Now. Everybody stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you again.